Talk about the NHS, let's talk about its gender service. Now, you may remember Dr. Hilary Cass, a very exhaustive report, the Cass report, not so long ago, essentially laid to rest the horror of the Tavistock Clinic for gender dysphoric children. You know, this was the Frankenstein's castle place where grown adults, qualified medical grown-ups, would tell sort of 8-year-old kids they were born in the wrong body, would prescribe for them when they reached puberty blockers to make sure they did not grow into the gender that they didn't want to be. These puberty blockers will change your life forever. The results are irreversible, and so on and so forth. In other words, Hilary Cass, who knows what she's talking about, said, look, we've got to be very careful. If a kid comes in and says, I think I'm in the wrong body, let's be, you know, this kid might be 12 years old, 15 years old, whatever. You know, let's be very, very careful here before we start advising them to have surgery. You know, life-changing surgery, your genitals changed, or drugs. You know, she said, be careful. And it looked to have brought about, at long last, a common sense change in our NHS. We will look back at the Tavistock Gender Dysphoric Clinic for Children with horror. The NHS, they ran this place. We will look back on it as the most horrific phase in the history of our health service. But that notwithstanding, some elements of our health service apparently aren't too keen on the Cass report. Let's talk to women's rights campaigner Kellie-Jay Keen. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very, very well. I'm glad you could join us tonight because you weren't too well last night, were you? How's your cough?
Yeah, I'm just, I've done a lot of coughing just before I started
You got it out of your system. That's good, that's good. Now, what do you think about that? This is the Nottingham Young People's Gender Service. It appears to be shunning Hilary Cass's recommendations in favour of pursuing those discredited trans guidances that I was just talking about, promoting puberty blockers and surgery without age limits. Well, I thought the Cass report was accepted by the NHS and that it would be acted upon. What do you make of what's going on in Nottingham?
Well, look, there's two separate issues. First and foremost, I want to say that I thought Cass was quite weak. Unfortunately, I thought she didn't go far enough. I thought she used the language of what I would describe the cult. And I think she sort of said, look, we can experiment on some children. So for me, it never really went far enough. As for other elements of the NHS, totally ignoring even her halfway kind of measures, I think we kind of knew this was happening because the Tavistock, the government didn't come out and say, hey, haven't we been doing some disgusting things to children? Aren't we just awful? Let's find some people accountable. Let's charge them with criminal activities and harming children, irreversible harm to kids. No, they didn't. They just said, let's just close the Tavistock. And I think there were quite a few of us that were very worried that what that meant was that the Tavistock would just dissipate around the country and we would find it far less easy to actually point the finger and doctors would be far too worried to say no. So I think this was always waiting in the wings to happen. Personally, I think if I go and smack a child in the face down the road, quite rightly, I would be criminalised. But if I'm a doctor and I administer some drugs that render them infertile, apparently it's fine.
Well, quite. As I say, I'm sure you agree. I mean, I don't live very far from the Tavistock Clinic, and the nickname for it in our community was Frankenstein's Castle, and quite rightly so, if you ask me. It's just astonishing. I don't know how many years it went on, but, you know, qualified adults telling little children, yeah, you're in the wrong body. What you need is these drugs. They'll change your lives forever. And then maybe we'll lop your genitals off. How about that? I mean, it just defies belief that the NHS sponsored that for so long. But this place, the Nottingham Young People's Gender Service, which has been called Tavistock Mark II, they're advertising for a clinical psychologist, and they're saying that it is essential to practice in a gender-affirming manner in line with guidance from the World Professional Association of Transgender Healthcare. Well, that organisation is, to say the least, controversial because they promote surgery and puberty-blocking drugs. So here we have an NHS establishment that is, having been told to follow the Cass report, is completely ignoring it and is acting like it never happened.
Yeah. I mean, who knew that if you could make absolute fortunes out of sterilising kids, that people would want to do it? Who knew that that would happen in America with their absolutely wonderful healthcare system, which exploits people all the time? Who knew? I think what's really surprising is that anyone thinks that they're on the right side when they're doing this. I personally think they're evil. I think if you do that to a child, I think you're a monster. And I think we need to start using very clear language about these people. It's abusive. They are child abusers. If they go along and they eradicate the fertility and the sexual function of a child or even an adult, and in Chelsea and Westminster, they're going to be doing what's euphemistically called phalloplasty, which is the most barbaric pretend surgery where girls pretend to turn into men with a variety of appendages stitched wherever. And that's going on in the Chelsea and Westminster to the tune of millions. Like, we are so not out of the dangerous waters when it comes to this so-called gender stuff. And anything with gender in it, like, as far as I'm concerned, gender dysphoria, I don't even believe it's a real thing. But if somebody's got some distress and they focus on a particular aspect of their physical body, they should be treated as a whole person. We don't need a specialist little special money-making service for people who have this particular issue. It just makes no sense. It's just a nasty, nasty money-making industry.
And it's also arguably homophobic because what it regularly does, it'll take some little boy or a boy who is clearly gay, attracted to men, and they will say, well, because you're attracted to men, you're obviously in the wrong body. You're a woman. Well, yeah. That's not the case. What he is a homosexual, and there's nothing wrong with being a homosexual. And yet these gender dysphoria clinics sort of seem to have concluded that it's wrong to be gay, and therefore we have to change your bodies. I mean, that is absurd, mad, and dangerous on so many levels, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But this is what happens when you invent something where people can make money or have some sort of kudos or status. Once you do that, then people come forward and they're invested in continuing it. And throughout the NHS, there is this investment in people who seem to not be very talented, but have found themselves in either talking therapies or whatever it is, which really depends on people continuing to have this specific issue. And so once you do that, all bets are off, really, because these people need to be relevant. And so they will just continue to invent patients and issues and reasons for patients to continue to use their service.
And there is also this issue of wokery, this kind of right-on thinking that somehow or other the administrators of puberty blockers and surgery to change children, they think that they're being kind. This is the right thing to do. And clearly, I think I heard stories of kids as young as 4 being taken to the Tavistock clinic. 4 years old. Parents saying, oh, our little girl keeps climbing trees, must be in the wrong body. And the Tavistock clinic going, well, let's have a serious discussion about this. I mean, it's there is that element, isn't it? That a certain mindset, the kind of wokey, lefty kind of mindset, they think that somehow or other the kind thing to do is to tell any kid who thinks they might be in the wrong body, yeah, right, let's lop it off.
Yeah, I don't know that they are being kind, Kevin. I don't even
think... No, they think they're being kind. That's my point. They're not being kind. I totally agree. They're being unkind.
I think they're signalling that they're being kind. It's a performance, right? So it's not real. If you really want to be kind to someone, then you would do the hard thing, which is telling them that it's absolute load of nonsense and they need to stop it and just wake up a little bit. But I think it's this signal. It's very toxic. And There is no kindness in it whatsoever, but they want everyone to, they virtue signal to everyone that they're this wonderful person, they're really accepting. And I think when it comes to mothers transitioning their children, and we do it far more than fathers, I think there is this nasty, toxic, performative, aren't I a great mother? Look at me, showing where.
Yeah,
I've get yourself a small dog, ladies.
I've seen that syndrome. You're right. Oh, look, these mums who are so proud. Look, my kid's trans. It's quite worrying. And the British Medical Association, which by the way is a 2-bit left-wing union, it's a trades union of doctors. They're challenging the Cass report as well. Now you say the Cass report didn't go far enough, but you must concede it was a good step in the right direction. The BMA basically wants to kick it out and go back to the old Tavistock days.
Well, who has any faith in doctors these days? I've been unlisted by my doctor for asking the person behind the counter to stop wearing a pronoun badge. So I really get on with the profession I'm here. But no,
what a troublemaker you are.
Look, I'll tell you what, any NHS, you can pay me £80,000 a year and I will come and inject some. I will be like the common sense advocate for any healthcare trust, and we'll just get this nonsense out. We'll stop spending money on it. We'll stop peddling nonsense and lies, and we'll just get back to, I don't know, helping and healing people. How about that?
Yeah, and I got an idea, right? So yesterday, or was it? Yeah, yesterday, Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, they launched this website. It's called sort of changenhs.uk or something, whereby the public can put in their suggestions for how to improve the NHS. And, of course, they got lots of facetious replies like put a Weatherspoons in every hospital, that kind of thing. But I know what I'd put in. I might even do this. Stop producing leaflets and pamphlets on motherhood that don't use the word women or woman. Stop calling women people with cervixes or people who get pregnant. Call them women. Call them mothers. And stop the absurdity of having to ask every single patient that walks in for an X-ray whether or not they're pregnant, even if they're me, even if they're some bloke with a beard and a beer gut who's 55 years old. Are you pregnant? That would improve the NHS. Get rid of this absolute sexist nonsense that basically has decided that women don't exist. They're people with cervixes. Well, that'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Are you categorically saying that you're not pregnant?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think that's 9 pints of lager, actually. But no, seriously, it's nonsense, isn't it?
It is absolute nonsense, and it's, my GP surgery told me that they're all going to start wearing pronoun badges. I mean, I don't know how much this badge scheme costs, but I feel as a woman, when I go to my local hospital or doctors and there's a pride flag, I just feel like. Even if I agreed with it, right? Even if they were flying my flag up outside the building, I don't want to know what they think about anything. I want to know that when I phone the doctor, I can have an appointment. I can actually go and see a doctor, not not a nurse or a healthcare worker or an ambulance driver. I just want to go and see a doctor, and then I want to make sure that if I need a consultant, that I can get one of those appointments as well. That's all I want. That's all we want. I don't need to know if my doctor is a Liverpool or an Everton fan. I don't want to know their first name. It's absolutely ridiculous. I just want to be treated. I think we all want to be treated equally by the NHS, which doesn't include virtue signalling lanyards or silly language. And it's always women's language as a race, because you men, you're allowed to have any prostate cancer literature is allowed to use the word man. Any cervical cancer literature, apparently, it's anyone with a cervix.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
why aren't we called people with testicles, whereas, you guys, if I can put it that way, are called women, people with cervixes. It's sexist. Yeah, you brought this up. This is what I wanted to talk to you about last night, partly. I mean, you noticed that the Scottish government has now issued instructions that there are 24 genders. It's quite interesting, all this, isn't it? Because only the BBC a couple of years said there was 107 genders. You never quite can get a handle on how many there are, but I can help. There are 2. It turns out that we taxpayers have, for the NHS, have footed the bill for £655,700 worth of LGBT-themed events, drag bingo, rainbow fudge and pronoun badges to celebrate Pride Month. That's in the NHS. Why, you know, this is an organisation that's complaining about not having enough money, and it's spending money on pride badges.
I'd love to know how many diversity and inclusion officers there are throughout the NHS.
I can tell you, 800.
Oh my! And they're on about 8,000, aren't they? Between 50 and 80,000.
Yeah. It costs. I think it costs £40 million a year. 800 diversity officers. That's absurd. That's absurd. You know, it's incumbent upon me to say there's nothing wrong with diversity officers. Well, I've got my doubts. But you don't need that many. You don't need that many. It's absurd. An organisation complaining about not having enough money, as you say, is paying between £40,000 and £60,000 a year to non-medical staff to be diversity officers. It's insane, Kelly.
Don't be awful to people at work. Can't we do that? Don't be awful to people at work. And I think we all supported the idea that inclusion used to be about people with physical disabilities or other disabilities, so they could actually be equal and treated fairly in places of work and have an opportunity to earn. And I think that's a fundamental right of everybody in this country, that they have an opportunity to be a full member of society. But actually, that's not what diversity and inclusion does anymore. All they do is stick up a flag, put some posters up and have some rainbow cakes. And quite frankly, that excludes women. Every time you do that, there will be people that feel less and less invested and involved in their workplace because they feel that it's, oh, here it is again.
Yeah.
And it's quite revolting. So I just want to go back. I feel like I'm about 80 when I say stuff.
No, but I'm you know, I've got to go in a second, Kelly. But what I always say, for example, about, you know, what do they call them? Gender equal loos, gender fluid loos and all that, you know. And there's all these rows and women don't feel safe and men feel uncomfortable. It's like, well, we used to have this really good system. It was called ladies and gents. Why don't we go back to that? I mean, this insanity that is consuming us on all these levels is driving me nuts. Great to talk to you, though, again, Kellie-Jay, and come on again soon. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Kellie-Jay Keen, women's rights campaigner. What do you think about everything she was saying? I'm with her all the way. 0344 499 1000. When we come back, Elon Musk's dad. Stay tuned.